Gunshots ring out in another American city. This is the last count I saw. That makes 9 people dead. And we're all feeling anger, rage, and if we're not careful, resentment. There are a lot of emotions roiling through us right now. None of those are wrong. We need to be able to feel what we need to feel in this moment. But we also need to be sure that we're channeling those feelings into constructive outcomes. We need to be working for that better world that we all want to see. So today, as we continue our Kingdom Rising series, we're going to talk about not just why we don't pick up the sword, but what we do with that anger as we walk together down Creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christopagan druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan druid and sous chef to the Dagda.
Today, we are going to take a step back and do something that is a little bit uncomfortable, but I invite you to stay with us. We're going to sit with that anger that we're all feeling and together talk about a way that we can work our way through it and use it for constructive aims. But before we get into all that, it's important to know that here we start wherever you are. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments or to head on over to CreationsPaths.com and share those with us. Let us know what your questions are so that we can answer them and help you. If you have anything that you want to share, share. We're here to move together as a community, and we can only do that when all of our voices are being heard. So let's just get into it now, shall we?
This is one of those subject matters. When working on getting together for the episode today, I was like, yeah, I've got this. I do this in practice, got it all down, got it all figured out. And I know for myself, I realized that I wanted to skip this step that we're going to be talking about today, this very important step. And I wanted to not skip it in as much as not do it, but that I thought I had it down so well, I wasn't giving proper time for it. And I wanted to change the language because growing up, I had been pre-programmed to avoid anger, to sublimate that into compassion, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I still had this, even after many decades of working on this step of the process, I still had this aversion to anger. And it was very surprising to realize like, oh, wait, no, I wanted to just call it compassion right out the gate or call it a spark or a flame. And even in working on the show notes where I'm like, no, it's a natural process. We accept it. We embrace it. It's something that everybody experiences when an injustice happens and we witness it, that injustice. We want to give into that moment of anger, that initial moment right there. And yet I still had all that conditioning buried deep down inside that wanted to not accept the word anger. And it's really tricky.
It is. It's something we have to be very careful about because anger, if we let ourselves just stew in it, can grow toxic and dangerous, both for ourselves and others. I'm not talking about stewing in that anger. I'm not talking about just sitting in that rage and seething in it. What we're talking about today is interrogating it, really seeing what is going on there, what's happening there, so that we understand why we're angry, what made us angry. Because if we don't see that first, we have a very high likelihood of lashing out and going after problems that aren't the actual problems that we're wanting to deal with.
This is why I really like the narrative framework put forward in the article of flame and fire, because it really helps to illustrate the experience. Because that initial anger, it's a natural process. We all have it. It is that initial flame that flares up in that moment of injustice. And it's real. It's there. Denying it is harmful. Working within that narrative framework really helps to understand, like, once you have that flame, what do you do with it? If you fuel it, the rage just gets crazy. It burns everything. It's destructive.
This is where the analogy of fire is very helpful because it is very closely tied to our experience of it. We do burn with anger. You just kind of feel that heat in your body. There is that kind of sense component that goes along with it. And so it becomes a very good analogy and tool for us to use going forward. Now, anytime anything traumatic happens, like what happened in Minneapolis, we get triggered into our survival instincts: fight, flight, freeze. If we flee, we just run away, we are endangering ourselves with the fire. Because if that fire got kindled, if that burning anger is within us and we run from it, that's how wildfires start. It goes wild and starts catching everything else on fire. We start lashing out at people in our regular everyday lives, not because we're mad at them, but because we're mad about this other thing that we haven't dealt with. And those flames have consumed everything and are starting to scorch everything we come into contact with. If we treat it like a hearth fire, we have to be careful again. If we don't control it, if we don't bring discipline to it, it'll burn the house down. The hearth fire is there to give us warmth and light. And so in that metaphor, we are bringing it home so that it can light us up and help us to see injustice. I think a lot of people went through this with the Black Lives Matter movement, where the daily barrage of death and murder opened people's eyes to a reality that most of us didn't see. It helped us to see what we were blind to. All of these are begging a question of what do we do next? To me, the most faithful thing, and I say this as a devotee and priest of Bridget, is to bring this into the hearth and into the forge. It needs to open our eyes so that we can see what is going on around us. It needs to illuminate the world so that we can see the nature of things around us. But in the forge, we can put it to use. Now, this is also dangerous because forges can make weapons as easily as they make tools. And I know right now, with everything going on, the last thing a lot of people want to hear is a voice of nonviolent resistance. But as a follower of Jesus and the path that he preached, this is essential for us to understand. The reason we don't repay violence for violence, like we talked about last week, is because that just perpetuates it. That continues the cycle. And it doesn't really matter what you were fighting about initially, because the current state is about what just happened. Well, you hit my brother because he hit your cousin who hit his friend, all the way back to the initial incident may be resolved, but the violence continues because there's nothing but reprisal and revenge. And when we go to the forge, when we bring this anger to the forge to heat the flames there, we need to be looking at what tools do we need to make a better future. And that's where we learn discipline. We're not over to solutions yet. We're going to start talking about how to come up with solutions next week. That's the creative aspect. Right now, it's about what we can do with that anger while we have it. This is where understanding our own gifts and talents really comes in. Are we making plows so that we can sow the fields so that something good can grow? Are we making a hoe so we can till up the soil to get the rocks out? What are we making? What can we use this fire for?
And I find that really interesting too, because the passage in the Bible about turning the swords into plowshares that I thought was neat, turning weapons of war into tools of use. And I was like, and of course, me being the contrarian, my brain's like, well, what about an axe? I mean, an axe is both. Like, you cut down trees for wood and stuff, but you also cut down a person with an axe. Like, they were used traditionally in both. But when you really framed it like that in the article, where it's for breaking up the soil so that it can be cultivated for something to grow, it really made enough of a shift, at least in my own head, that really helped me to understand what was meant. And also the whole like, oh, that's neat.
Well, see, the analogy also helps us understand that we're not making axes, sickles, or scythes, all of which can be used as weapons, because those are tools of harvest.
Yeah, this is a tool of planting, of growing, of the beginning of a process, of the cycle.
Of bringing that change about. Now, a hoe tills up the soil. It breaks up the soil so we can get out the rocks, we can get out the roots that don't need to be there, we can pick out the weeds that are growing there. but it's about working in the soil. I'm sure it's possible to use a hoe as a weapon, but it would be a very gangly one. It would be a very difficult one to use. And that's what one of the things that makes this analogy very helpful. If we are going to have a better world, yes, we need to stop the actual abuses that are currently happening and happening now. Yes. But we also have to have an eye ever towards that greater systemic change. I mentioned this to someone just the other day when they made a remark of who's going to hold this administration accountable. And I pointed out, never in our history have we held an administration accountable. We have to imagine how to do that. George Washington threatened to raise an army and to lead it himself against a group of people protesting to have basic rights as workers and a share in the profits that their labor made. He wasn't punished for that. Andrew Jackson ignored the Supreme Court and moved the Cherokee and others down the Trail of Tears when he was explicitly ordered not to, and he was never punished for that. We can keep going through.
Yeah, I was gonna say, McKinley did a lot of the things that are happening now. McKinley did before 100 years ago.
McKinley and all of the wars in South America and our war with Spain. We can go through Iran-Contra and all of the other things. We've never held power accountable in this country. And so we have to sit back and before we even get to how do we do it, which is the next step, conceive of what would that even look like? What would holding the powerful accountable in our country even look like? We don't have an example to point to. We've never done it. And that's where sitting with this and start to think, what are the tools that we need really starts coming in, because we have to be able to conceive, what about this actually made us angry? What is the thing that engendered the outrage in us? Was it simply the murder? Was it how it was done? Some people are already quibbling over procedures. Were you angry because procedures weren't followed? You might be. None of these answers are wrong. We need to ask ourselves, what made us angry? What in this moment? Was it just the senseless loss of life? Any of these answers could be correct. But until we know individually in ourselves what outraged us and caused this anger to rise, we can't start doing the work of imagining how we fix it. And that's where these tools come in. We might need to build a fire poker. There might be too much ash on the log that we can't see the embers clearly. So we might need to go to the forge and make a poker so that we can move the logs around and see what's actually going on. Now is the time to make those tools to do that discernment so that we can, once we know what we see as wrong, we can go into the next step next week of how we fix it. How do we come up with solutions for it?
So when sitting with this in this moment, how do you not have it just extinguish, go out? Because you have this flame that has happened. And at least for myself, if I get distracted, I wander off. Sometimes it's gone.
I'm glad you bring that up because that's something that's hard for me to understand. I've been angry since the George W. Bush administration, even before. And so my flames have been glowing hot for a really long time. And unfortunately, my fire has stayed alive because the things that outrage me keep happening. They just keep happening. The Iraq War happens again and again and again and again. We can look at our bombings in Iran. We can look at what we're doing in Venezuela. We can go through the history from then to now and see that over and over and over again. We can see the demonization of others and the scapegoating of others. And all of those things are what enrage me and keep my fires going. So I personally have not had an issue keeping the fire alive because fuel keeps getting thrown on it. And I know for some of you out there, because I see you in the various social media spaces that I engage in, are having a similar experience. Some aren't. The fire is not always about anger. Anger is a fire. But the reason we bring it to the forge is the place of discipline. You have to be clear-headed to use a forge. There's molten metal here. You can burn yourself really easily and a lot worse than you would at a stove or a hearth. We're dealing with the changing of things and making alloys and a lot of hard work and discipline. Discipline is what keeps the fires alive. And they don't have to constantly be fueled by anger and rage. It's just, this is one of the fuels that we can put into that fire. This can be kept alight by our sense of righteousness. What do we think is right and wrong? Our sense of justice and injustice. Our sense of, and I think this is a dirty fuel to put into it, but a lot of people work off of it, our sense of duty and obligation, which are things that we really need to be deconstructing on our own parts. But it is a discipline to be about the work of creating and cultivating a new world that we want to see happen.
I really like that you brought up discipline, because I find that in this moment, when you're giving this space, you're faced with a choice. You're going to make a choice no matter what, whether it's automatic because you were already preconditioned to do so, or mindfulness and sitting and going, I'm going to go ahead and cultivate or grow this, that, or the other. I really like that you brought up discipline, because that mindfulness really needs that discipline coupled with it, to be patient and give yourself that space, that moment needed to really think about where you want to go with that, what is behind the beginning of it and where you want to go. I think that really helps make a better informed decision. And even then, like, I realized that when, for myself, I would experience the flame going out because I walked away or whatever, it really wasn't, it was being snuffed out, which is also not good. That's almost back to that flight bit where I ran away quick enough. I guess I created a gust of wind and the flame went whoop, and was gone. But that is also harmful and not good. And I think that's because of that preconditioned anger bad, compassion good. So therefore it must be compassion or not existent. And once again, existing in that moment, giving that space, being able to make the conscious choice instead of the pre-programmed choice, prevent freezing, that inactivity, on the, I guess, the dangers of that apathy and the dangers of that setting in where you go, there's nothing I can do. Oh, well, the truth might be there might be nothing you can do in the moment, because a lot of these things are grander than the moment.
I want to stop you there. There's never nothing you can do in the moment. Extending empathy and sympathy are something we can always do in the moment. And just because powerful people who do not want to fix the problem have turned everything into a moment of thoughts and prayers, and that has become such a trite sentiment because we know they don't mean it.
Yeah, that's actually where I'm building to, is in this space, you're making the plans for cultivating the ground. You're making those choices. And next week, we're going to be talking more about what you do in the creative act, what you do when you move into that next phase when you're building. And because as I started with saying, I want to jump ahead. My brain wiring is, okay, we're here, now we're done, let's move on.
Well, a part of that is that we have made discipline into a dirty word. We've made the word discipline synonymous with punishment. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is not just knowing how to sit up straight and have proper posture. It's not any of the things that we tend to associate it with in this kind of military industrial complex we've been living under for such a long time. Discipline is being able to control and master the thing that we are doing. It's having control and mastery over ourselves and our actions in the world. That's what discipline is. And taking the time, like we're doing right now, to teach people discipline, to learn discipline, to practice discipline ourselves is a very important process. And sometimes, like you were saying, we don't have the time or the energy right now. And yes, that can lead to neglect that lets the fires go out. But in Ireland, they had a practice on nights when they were to let the fire die, to rekindle it the next day. And of course, you don't want the fire to actually go out. So they did what was called smearing the fire. What does that mean? They would build an ash bed around the embers in such a way that they would stay warm all night, but not really burn. It kind of put the fire in hibernation for the night. So in the morning, when they would come out and they would remove the ashes and add new fuel in, it would spark back up from that ember and light the hearth anew. That is a discipline that we can learn ourselves. That is different from denial. That's different from repression. It's just do not have the time for this right now. Let's pack the ember nice so that it isn't burning the house down and isn't going to die out. And we're going to put it over here. And when I have time to bring my conscious mind to it, I can knock the ashes off, add in the various fuels from my discipline, and bring the fire back to deal with it then. And that's a valid thing to do. And it may be hard for some people out there because we are talking in metaphors. And that's because we all have different thinking processes. We all have different ways to name how we interact with our mental landscape. And so the metaphors that we're using here are intended to help bridge this gap of not only using the metaphor, but kind of explaining what it means, because I can't tell you how to smur that flame. I can't teach you how to build that flame, how to discipline that flame. And there are many coping mechanisms out there that you can find and have access to. Some will work for you, some won't. Those are for each of us individually to learn. The language we're sharing right now is a language that we can have between each other so that we can make these very hard to talk about unseen processes intelligible, that we can discuss them. And it's not easy.
No, it's all the difficult words like discipline and anger and accepting them for what they are and not attributing morality to it.
And a lot of the work that we talk about here is about removing these things from the false dichotomies that they get put in. A disciplined person is never frivolous. Oh, no, a disciplined person can be frivolous. There are times for just extravagant joy. That's actually part of living a disciplined life, knowing when it is time to just embrace that joy and to just celebrate. And it's also about knowing when is the time to be somber, when is the time to be inappropriately funny. These are all disciplines that we have to learn, and that they are not about us. Yes, your coping mechanism might be inappropriate humor, dark humor. Mine often is. But living in right relationship with the world around us helps us to realize and be disciplined about when we share those jokes, those ideas, those thoughts. Because what I find funny, other people might hurt them more. It might cause more pain. This is why we learn to sit with these things. Because when we live in a reactive state, we're not really in control of ourselves. We are living at the whims of others who instigate an action. And through that instigated action, we react. And in the state we're currently living in, that's what they are relying on. They're just going to keep poking and poking and poking. And they're going to do something over here. And they're going to do something over here. And they're going to do something over here. And then something over here. And just, as Bannon said, flood the zone. We're going to do so much, so quickly, and all the time that we end up in this reactive state. And we end up like the dog in Up. Squirrel, squirrel. The purpose of all of this happening together is to keep us reactive. This stage of sitting with the feeling, sitting with it and allowing it to be there takes us from reaction to action. Once we understand what it is that made us angry, what made us have these feelings, what it is that we see that needs changing, we now can choose the actions that follow.
Which leads to a sustainable energy. To bring up a term that gets used a lot these days, but it's easy to forget that anger, when it flames into rage, that is a quick, cheap source of energy. It's like burning oil. It's very toxic. It's very harmful. In the long run, it's destructive and it's not sustainable. But being able to cultivate that flame in the hearth, in the forge, having that plan, that direction where you're wanting to take it becomes a sustainable source of energy that can carry you forward. And then each quote unquote distraction, when the zone gets flooded, is no longer subtracting from you. It is adding new fuels that you can add and build upon. And as long as you're taking that moment, that time to cultivate that with discipline, this is where you find those people that seem to have this inexhaustible source of energy to fight every fight. It's not because they just magically had all this energy. I mean, technically, yes, but no. It's that they went through these steps and they built up each time. Each quote unquote distraction became fuel, and they knew exactly what they were doing with that fuel, and it sustained them. And over the long fight, they knew what they wanted to grow, what they're building towards.
And they knew when it was time to go to sleep, that they take a break and leave others to do the work for a bit so that we can recuperate.
Yeah.
And that's really the question that we're asking here. What made us angry? Do we have the time, energy, and attention to put into it? If so, what do we have the time, energy, and intention to put in? And really doing that self-evaluation work so that everything that flows out of here is action. This is the work of the Via Negativa, the negative way, the second path. It is so much more and so much powerful than most people give it credit for. To a lot of people, this is just a place of pain and grief. And yes, they are there. They are there. I am feeling grief and pain over what happened to a stranger in Minneapolis right now. I know a lot of us are. But this is what it means to sit with that. We don't just sit there and go, you're suffering. Yay, suffering. Sometimes that's all we can do. And it's important to know when that's the case. This is not one of those times. This is a time for us to be asking ourselves, what made us angry? What needs to change? What pain point did this push at that made us have this reaction? And then once we know all that, we can move on to the next path next week.
If you like, share it in the comments. Let us know what you came up with, what you discovered in yourself. I realized for myself, it's twofold. Share that same pain point that Charlie shares, but I also have a lot of anger with the injustice that was done to the very social contract that the country I live in is held together by.
Yeah.
The injustice to the Constitution, the very First Amendment. We were talking about it earlier today. And in my taking a moment to explore the pain deeper and to sit with it and realizing that every single one of the First Amendment clauses were violated in that one act, in one moment.
The first and the 14th.
Yeah. And it's like, okay. So, share what you find. Love to hear it. Talk to you about it in the comments.
And if you want to know more about this topic, I did write an entire essay about this. It's available over on CreationsPaths.com that digs into the philosophy and the ideology a bit more to help you get an understanding of what we're talking about here with, I don't want to say necessarily more depth, but a different kind of depth.
It's a different kind of depth. And it's got a lot of biblical citations for those that want to look to those stories for their source material. It really gets into that because it's part of this exploration of what does it mean to live by the sword. And it's a continual exploration of the taking up the sword and all those different references throughout Matthew.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or CreationsPaths.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they don't notify us, so we won't know. But you can leave a comment there anyway because engagement is magic. And then head over to CreationsPaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave a message there, and we will see it, and we will be able to get back to you. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars, you can pass our way. We offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both, and you can support us using the Cash App hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. We are ever so grateful. Thank you so much. You all really do help us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on our table. If we've ever said anything that's helped you out, please share it with others. That helps us out more than you know.
Before we go, most holy God who pleases himself by hiding in the dark places that have to be sought out, ember of justice that reminds us that our greatest task in this life is to take care of one another, burn bright within us and help us to see the way. Open our eyes that the path may be clear, that we can walk forward and achieve everything that we have in our hearts and bring forth that shining new day and that glorious world to come that we long for so deep. Amen.
Amen.